Welcome to this explainer. You know, whether it's the smartphone in your pocket, the clothes you're wearing, or even the software running your workplace, your daily life is literally shaped by the greatest economic mystery of our time, the diverging development paths of India, China, and Pakistan. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the comparative development experiences of India and its neighbors. We're going to look closely at how three nations that started in very similar positions back in the mid-20th century ended up on such vastly different economic trajectories today. To piece this puzzle together, we'll be breaking things down into 5 key areas: their developmental paths, demographic indicators, GDP and sectors, the human capital divergence, and finally, indicators of human development. Let's jump right into Section 1, Developmental Path, a snapshot view. It's actually wild when you think about it. All three of these countries started their modern economic planning at almost the exact same time. India launched its first 5-year plan in 1951, China followed in 1953, and Pakistan in 1956. They were all essentially on the exact same starting block. But here is where it gets interesting. They introduced major paradigm-shifting economic reforms decades apart. China took the leap first in 1978, followed much later by Pakistan in 1988, and then India in 1991. At the start, India and Pakistan were basically running the exact same playbook. We're talking mixed economies, massive public sector investments, and import substitution to build up domestic industries. But notice the triggers for when they finally opened up their economies. China reformed proactively, by choice. India and Pakistan, on the other hand, their reforms were reactive. They were largely crisis-driven, initiated under heavy pressure and compulsions from the World Bank and the IMF. And that difference right there perfectly captures our core mystery. For nearly a century, India and China were practically neck and neck in GDP per capita, right up until the late 1970s. But then, starting in the 1980s, China's economic trajectory violently pulled ahead of India's. Today, China's GDP per capita is vastly higher. So how exactly did they pull that off? To answer that, we need to look at Section 2, Demographic Indicators. 1.422 billion. I mean, that is just a staggering number. In 2024, India officially overtook China to become the most populous country in the entire world. Now, being the biggest country by population brings immense opportunities for sure, but it also brings incredibly complex logistical and economic challenges. Right now, India is sitting on a massive demographic dividend. Looking at the data for 2024, the age pyramid bulges right in the middle, which represents a massive prime working age population. But as the projections for 2050 show us, this window won't stay open forever. Over the next few decades, that working age workforce will actually start to shrink, and the elderly population is going to boom. Basically, India has a limited amount of time to really cash in on this demographic advantage. But there's a really fascinating paradox hidden within these numbers. The states with the highest fertility rates are predominantly the poorer, more rural northern states, like Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. Meanwhile, the more economically prosperous southern states have fertility rates that have already fallen below replacement levels. What does that mean? Well, it means India's future workforce growth is mostly going to come from the exact areas that are currently the least equipped to educate and employ them. Meanwhile, China took a radically different demographic path. You've probably heard of the famous one-child policy implemented in the late 1970s, which drastically slammed the brakes on their population growth. At the same time, they rapidly urbanized. They moved hundreds of millions of people out of rural areas and straight into high-productivity city jobs. This is a huge contrast to India and Pakistan, which both still have massive rural majorities heavily dependent on agriculture. And that rural to urban shift leads us perfectly into Section 3, Gross Domestic Product and Sectors. So, the textbook progression for a developing economy is usually shifting workers from agriculture into industry and then finally into services. China followed that script flawlessly. They fueled their immense growth by transforming into a secondary sector, manufacturing powerhouse. India, however, pulled off this strange economic quirk. They effectively leapfrogged the entire manufacturing phase and jumped straight into becoming a tertiary service sector dominant economy. The big takeaway here? India still has a massive chunk of its workforce stuck in low productivity agriculture. In fact, in recent years, agricultural employment in India has actually been increasing. That goes against almost everything we know about how modern economies develop. China, on the flip side, successfully transitioned its masses from farms to factories. Pakistan, meanwhile, remains heavily dependent on a pretty volatile agricultural sector, which has unfortunately hindered its ability to achieve stable growth.
Let's explore why this happened in Section 4, the human capital divergence.
Why exactly did China master manufacturing while India leans so heavily into services? Well, it all comes down to their highly divergent approaches to human capital, basically how they educated and mobilized their own people. China took a bottom-up approach. Long before their economic reforms even started, they focused on mass primary education and basic literacy. This created the exact ingredient you need for a manufacturing boom: a vast, literate, easily trainable blue-collar workforce. India, carrying over a legacy from its colonial times, took a top-down approach. They invested heavily in elite university education. This created a phenomenal pool of highly skilled professionals, which was perfect for an IT and service sector boom, but it unfortunately left tens of millions of ordinary citizens illiterate and trapped in subsistence farming. You can really see the impact of that when you look at the enrollment data. Primary school enrollment in China absolutely crushed India's numbers during those crucial middle decades of the 20th century. By the time China opened up its economy in 1978, a huge majority of its adult population could read, write, and follow factory instructions. At that same time, India's basic literacy was lagging far behind. But hey, human capital isn't just about who goes to school, it's about who actually gets to enter the workforce, and deeply rooted cultural barriers are still very real. Take female labor force participation, for example. In China, it's over 71%. In India, it's languishing down around 30% due to patriarchal norms and a heavy motherhood penalty. That means India is literally missing out on the economic engine of hundreds of millions of women. Pakistan faces its own severe human capital hurdles too, which are compounded by political instability and an overdependence on foreign aid, slowing down their organic economic momentum. Which leads us to our final area, Section 5, Indicators of Human Development. So, after decades of these wildly different strategies in economics, demographics, and education, where do the actual citizens of these three nations stand today when it comes to quality of life? The 2025 Human Development Index rankings give us the ultimate scorecard. Today, China sits comfortably in the high human development category at rank 75. India has definitely made great strides but is further down at rank 130 in the medium category. And Pakistan is trailing at 168, currently facing low human development. If you think of HDI as a pie, it's made up of three slices: health, education, and standard of living. China grabbed a commanding lead across all three of these slices very early on. Their early adoption of rural health interventions, like the commune system, combined with that mass literacy we talked about earlier, gave them a rock-solid foundation. It allowed them to capitalize massively on their economic reforms. India is improving rapidly for sure. Life expectancy is way up, and millions have been pulled out of poverty. But inequality remains a massive drag on their overall score. India's HDI is absolutely on the rise, and they're quickly emerging as a global leader in AI skills and digital infrastructure. But as China starts dealing with a rapidly aging population, and as all three of these nations face the incredibly disruptive rise of artificial intelligence, the rules of the game are changing all over again. India has the raw youth, China has the deep infrastructure, and Pakistan has incredible untapped potential. So we have to ask, as the 21st century unfolds, whose developmental foundation is truly built to last? I'll leave you to think about that one. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the data.